Hi, I'm Joe Dalton and welcome to Breakthrough Brands, the show that tells you how Ireland's entrepreneurial DNA is rebooting the country one successful startup at a time. In this series, we'll demystify the process of starting up your own enterprise and growing it into a successful business by sharing the inspirational, educational, real-life experience of ordinary Irish business people. We talk to entrepreneurs who have taken control of their own destiny by doing what they love.
Hello, good afternoon. This is Patrick Daly. I'm standing in for Joe Dalton today, and today we'll be speaking to Shane Cradock. Shane is a consultant, speaker and trainer, and he's author of the book Inspire Me. So talking of inspiration, Shane, what inspired you to start your own business?
Okay, we'll get into the easy question straight away, Patrick. What inspired me to start my own, I actually probably, if I'm being honest, I always had this thing at the back of my head, probably instilled by my father, who never did work for himself, but used to always turn to myself, my brother, my sister, and periodically and say, you know, always look to work for yourself. And without realising it, it probably was a kind of almost unconscious program, because when the opportunity came years later, I had a career with the multinational. I joined Pepsi Cola. I suppose out of college I worked at Bord na Móna first. I suppose, you know, my dad I think probably had forgotten that because what he'd said when we were younger, and maybe it was just from his own experiences of frustration in work, but as we were growing up he always said to me, look, join a big company, get them to pay for an MBA and travel the world with them. And that's kind of what I ended up doing as well. So I was with Pepsi, but I ended up, I suppose, having an interesting personal situation in my mid-20s where I found myself in a very stressful situation, which led to, being honest, a breakdown. But out of that, I suppose, recovery, one of the things that happened was I started to ask myself a lot of questions about, well, why am I doing this job? What really matters to me? What am I trying to create? Actually, why am I here? And how did I end up in this job? And what do I really want to do? And then it kind of all culminated one day where my boss at the time, who knew I wanted to get an MBA and a certain job and was batting for me, he was a sponsor, pulled me into his office and said, listen, here's the MBA, here's the job that you wanted, congratulations. And the words that came out of my mouth were not what I expected and were not what he expected, because I said, thanks very much, I'm leaving. And I hadn't made that decision before I went into the office. It was just one of those, you know, I'm sure you've had the same, where you just get a moment in your life where you go, do you know what, every part of my body is saying, I'm out of here, baby. So he was shocked.
So you were on the multinational corporate ladder, which really is, you know, you've got to be willing to travel, you've got to be willing to sacrifice a lot of time. Yeah. And is that why? Is that why you changed? Is that why you took a right turn?
Partly. Like, I loved working for the company. I loved working for Pepsi, I will be honest. But what was happening was, because I'd had that challenging time in my 20s, you know, where it was pretty severe now. It was pretty severe. I came out of that a kind of a different person, that challenging time. And I was asking these questions in the background. So as I was working away in my career, you know, I was starting to get better and better. But I was asking myself, you know, even from a life point of view, what's it all about? And then I was asking myself questions that maybe you wouldn't normally ask, perhaps until you get to your midlife crisis in your 40s, where you're saying, like, what's it all about? I was asking those questions in my mid-20s. And then, you know, I stayed with Pepsi, I think, for 5-6 years, so it wasn't immediate, but there was a process going on in the back of my mind. And I think I do remember having this kind of flash when he asked me the question, and I think it was building up my mind. I just saw this almost like a series of pictures. Another way on a TV screen you can see these pictures stacked up behind each other. I could just see people ahead of me who I knew who were not happy, who I didn't think had a good quality of life. I saw broken marriages. I saw a lot of stress. And for me, it just wasn't for me. For other people, maybe they wouldn't have seen the same thing, but that's what I saw. And in that instant, I just went, okay, I'm out. I didn't have a plan. It wasn't necessarily the most responsible thing to do, but it was effectively almost like getting fired, except I fired myself. Yeah. I didn't have a plan, didn't have really much cash reserves. The only good thing was that I didn't have a family, you know, because that could have been a different, I wouldn't have been the same.
Proposition, yeah.
Yeah, and I probably wouldn't have been as, inverted commas, reckless. But it was a significant turning point. And when I stepped out, I went, okay, you know, the first month came and I didn't have, you know, when payday comes, looking at my bank account, nothing came in. I was like, oh, okay, this is real. And I remember even having to, a friend of mine ran me close to the time when when I was supposed to have the wages coming in, and we were chatting. He said, "You don't sound yourself," and I was like, "No, I'm not. I'm a little bit stressed." He says, "What's up?" He says, "I need to get my hand in a few grand, so I can kind of live, pay my rent." And he said, "How much do you need?" I told him, and in fairness to him, he wrote me a check. He says, "Pay me back in 6 months' time." With interest, I might add, which I had to pay. But that was the motivator. So then I went, okay, what skills do I have that I can use that I can sell? And my first thought was I can sell to the SME sector. Mm-hmm. And I can I'd had a phenomenal education in Pepsi. I was working with some of the best consultants there. It was a great experience at the time because they had made so many changes in the company there in Pepsi in Cork. And so I just thought, okay, if I can compress that stuff and take what I know, let's see, can I sell it to people? Now, you're talking to somebody who didn't like selling, who wouldn't have seen himself as a natural salesperson. So I was way out of my comfort zone.
So we'll catapult into the future to now, and then gradually work our way back. Just interested now to see what is the business as it is now? What do you do? Who do you do it for? Where do you do it? And what kind of results do you produce for people?
This is my elevator pitch now, Patrick. You can assess it afterwards. Okay, so what the business does now is it helps people to grow on a business, organizational and personal level. So my job, as I see it, it's, I run a solo practice. So it's Shane Cradock is the brand. My primary target audience in terms of private clients would be CEOs and entrepreneurs of organizations that are minimum 10 million turnover and up, and that in some cases can be quite large organizations. So my job is to help them to clarify what they want to create for the business, but also, and this is a big focus of my work, probably because I can track it back to what I said to what happened in Pepsi, is their quality of life. And that was one of the things probably I took from the corporate world now that I'm thinking about, is that, a lot of people think you have to sacrifice your life for your career, and I think that's ridiculous. And in the digital age, you just have one life, so let's make them, it's short, life is precious, life is short, so let's make the most of it. So that's what I do. So the key emphasis will be around clarifying what their goals are. My job is to challenge to make sure it's as holistic as possible, and life is in there, and then to challenge them as we're going along, if they want me to help as a partner, to make sure that they don't go off track. Now, after that, sometimes they'll ask me, which very often happens, to work with some of their lieutenants as a team or as one-to-one. And then sometimes we'll take some training into maybe some of the other levels of the business, but that could be training to do with the mind side of it, in terms of mindset, which is increasingly important, productivity, even work-life balance, and leadership. So that would be the core. Outside of that, I run different workshops that are open to anybody. So that could be to do with, getting clarity in your own 3-year vision for your personal and professional life, and they're run periodically, at different times around the year. So hopefully that makes sense. Okay.
So from where you were then, getting a loan from your friend, to where you are now, what time frame are we talking about there?
Sorry, from when I left Pepsi?
Yeah, to now.
To now. You're talking 17 years.
17 years, okay. So in that time, to get from there to here, what obstacles did you encounter along the way? What lessons did you learn as you came forward?
Well, the biggest lesson that I learned, and the biggest obstacle that that I encountered, I'm just laughing at myself for what I'm going to say, was myself.
Okay.
I am and was the biggest obstacle to anything. So, and that's what I learned through that, I suppose what I would call it, the breakdown period, where I realised actually that I have a mind, and that what that says to me determines how I behave and ultimately affects my results. So bizarrely now today, I just came back in from, I was telling you earlier on, from London. So I was meeting to a CEO and an entrepreneur yesterday in London, and half of the conversation with them is really around helping them to make sure that they're not getting in their own way. And so it could be as simple as what I would call a mental virus, or I jokingly say that my inner voice, the inner critic, I call it Gollum. And so it has a judgment on everything, especially yourself. So if you think about it, it can affect your doubt, your confidence. your ability to just think clearly, your ability to step into the unknown, which is key as an entrepreneur or CEO, and also the power of vision. In an increasingly busy, distracted world, more and more I'm meeting people who just really haven't got clarity on what they're trying to do. They get very distracted and very stressed. So that's the biggest obstacle, and I still think it is the biggest obstacle, is just getting out of your own way. And that is, for me, probably my biggest passion. In a way, I kind of look at myself as somebody, the way if somebody had a heart attack, they might completely reorganize their life in terms of health and fitness and food. I had a mind attack. Yeah. My mind tried to take me out. And, my wife, Judy, will sometimes kind of say to me, like, what are you reading another book about the mind for? Or why are you doing another seminar? Why are you doing another course for? And I'm kind of going to her, she said, do you not know enough already? I said, no, I know what I know, and that's my job. But I said, just by putting your attention into that area, I'll always find something in myself that I didn't see, or I knew and I stopped doing. I'll always pick something up, So as a mentor of mine said to me years ago, when the student is ready, even the crappiest guru will do. So if you're kind of into something, so I mean, that's the honest answer. Like the other obstacles outside of that would have been what you would call real life obstacles, where, trying to learn the skills of business. And they're very real too. So like on the mental side, that's an inner skill. And then the outer skills of business, I think, are what hold most self-employed and solo business owners back, is that it's the movement of skills. So at the start, I had to learn how to sell. I didn't have a notion. So I knew two guys who I thought were brilliant salespeople, and they were and are. And the first thing I did was, okay, I'll ask the two of them, can I hang out with them for 2 days while they work? So that's what I did. And I just watched them do things that I would never consider doing. And then I realized, oh, hold on, there's a totally different world here that I need to get my mind into. And so you learn the skills of selling, and then, okay, what's the next skill? I probably need to understand finance. Okay, now I need to understand marketing, referrals. As you know, it's a never-ending progression. So, but even there, your own ego can get in the way. So no, I don't need to do that. I know enough. And so that's also trying to get around yourself.
So this idea of getting out of your own way, you talked about, I think it sounds to me like kind of almost mental hygiene, and having poor thinking skills or poor thinking habits. What role does self-esteem or confidence play in all of that? Is this a continuum? Does one thing play into the other, or how do you see it?
I think it's pretty significant. I think most people, if they're honest, would admit that their self-confidence is not exactly where they want it to be. Now, it'd be rare that they tell it to your face, but my job, I get to see behind what I call the curtain of the Wizard of Oz. You kind of, people would admit things to me that they wouldn't possibly to other people. And I've, over the 17 years of working with people in really successful companies, it always amazes me when people are honest. And sometimes you're dealing with somebody who think is, oh my God, like they have it all. They're so assertive, but then they say, well, actually, I'm actually inside. I'm dying here, and I'm really struggling. So, I suppose to me, I think about two overlapping circles. One is the outer game, which is all the skills we're talking about even communication, presentation skills, marketing, everything to do with the technical skills where most of the world is focused. And then the other circle, which overlaps with it, is the inner game, which is you. And that's to do with, as you call it there, mental hygiene, which is but that to me is level one. Everybody should understand that mental hygiene is totally available for everybody, and it's an essential thing. And some people talk about mental health is great, but I think you need to progress up from that. So what I learned was, and this is the part that I didn't expect, was that what I learned, the principles of mental hygiene or health, if I kept going with it, then you could create what I would call mental wealth. And that's where you start to, if you match it up with skills on the outside, like for example, managing your time, which most people are brutal at, right? And they seem to be getting worse. If you manage your time with a good mind, now you start to build results. You start to build results that's good for your brain, it's good for your memory, because when you flip inside and say, well, am I getting things done here? And do I feel in control of what I'm doing in terms of the captain of my ship? So they go hand in hand. You can't be walking around thinking, I'm mentally fantastic, but really I'm getting nothing done. It's all about results. So that's key. And I think most people, even in the mental game, miss that side of it. It's not about just looking after yourself, protecting yourself and not taking the hits. Taking the hits is actually really important. I think, you know, the more I put myself in the way of challenges or obstacles, the more I test myself and see, well, how good are you really? But out of all those, like the best and worst challenges I've ever had, probably the same for you, Patrick, or anybody listening, is, and I was even saying to the entrepreneur last night, you know, he was saying, do you think you get, I feel like I'm more confident as I get older. I feel like I can handle things better. And I said, is it just age? And I said, no, I don't think so. Some people I know who are older than me have less confidence. I think it's more to do with adapting, putting yourself into new situations, challenging yourself and forcing yourself to adapt and learn and dig in deep. And that requires a bit of willingness to go into pain. Yeah. You know, and pain is good if you treat it right.
It's like a physical exercise.
Yeah.
And the pain you experience,
exactly.
When you exercise a muscle, and this muscle, as you exercise it, as you stress it, and as you get into discomfort, it gets stronger.
Exactly.
I think another element to this, I don't know if you agree, is learning how to say no to things. Because being able to say no to the things you don't want or are not convenient for you allows you the freedom then to say more times yes to the things you do want.
Unless it's something that your wife is asking you to do. And then it's just like, well, absolutely,
exactly.
honey, no problem. When will I start? No, yeah. I mean, look, one of the programs I run is called Time Shift, and it's about productivity in the digital age and also getting a life. And one of the recurring problems for people in that consistently is the inability to say no. So, you know, most people these days will say that, oh my God, like, you know, I'm so busy. It's like a badge of honour in a warped way. But when you get down to it, they're not really actually making any progress. I had a client, just as a funny story, in a very big tech company. They'd be a very well-known brand globally. And he brought me in to help him. So he's a director. He was in charge of about, say, 1,000 people in a division. And, you know, my job was to help him achieve his results. So we're looking at, okay, let's clarify what you want, all that kind of stuff. And then I was just doing my hygiene checks for his work on the outer game. And so we came to email. I said, well, how are you with email? He said, no, we don't need to talk about email. I said, why not? He says, because I'm an email rock star. I said, oh, wow. I said, I've never met one of those before. What does that mean? He says, come here and I'll show you. And so he taught me through the system that he had for email and showed me online. He says, at the end of the day, every day, I'm down to 0. I said, wow. And he showed me this really complex Rain Man level of folders and everything else. And I said, that's amazing. And I said, so why am I here? He said, well, you're here to help me improve my results. And I said, all right, okay. How much time do you spend doing this every day? And we worked it out, and it was literally about 3.5 to 4 hours. And I said, okay, that's part of the problem. I said, and this is where most people are. It's so easy to be busy, thinking you're being busy, but actually you're going nowhere. And when he stopped and looked at it, he said, oh my God, like, you know, I feel like a numpty now for that. But he had the habit of, and it took a while to change it, but most people, because their devices, you know, they're just addicted to being busy and thinking that they're busy, and the saying no thing that you're bringing up. For most people, they'll agree with you, but they find it really hard. And this is, again, overcoming yourself. You know, you are the obstacle most of the time, if you're honest with yourself, and that's the hard bit.
There's a mentor which I think we've both engaged with over the years, and he says something like, I'm never amazed how stupid I was 2 weeks ago, which is this thing of, you know, incrementally learning and getting out of your own way as you go forward. So in terms of mentors, you are now a mentor to many. Have you chosen mentors along your way, and what did they tell you, and what did you learn from them, and what benefits did mentoring bring to you?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that mentoring is hugely important. At the time in Pepsi, you know, say, think back to there, that was where I had unofficial mentoring. There were some really great people there that used to give me a steer. And one of the things that I learned through the difficult time at that time was the value of feedback. And what was funny was watching myself, you know, the way most people would say, oh no, feedback is a gift. But they don't really mean it because it's painful. And I always remember one of my boss's bosses, one of the changes I made was I said, I need to find where I have blind spots. And the only way I'm going to find it out is, because if I find them, I can avoid the pain that I've just gone through, which is very severe. So I want to avoid that. So let me see where the blind. So I used to ask everybody all the time, what are the blind spots? Be brutal. And literally, you know, they'd look at me and kind of go, Really? Are you sure you want the truth here? I go, I think so. Right. But from that, what I realised was it's critically important to have mentors as you go along, mentors that will tell you the truth. Critically important. Some of those mentors can be friends, but I think a lot of the value is to do with, I'll always think about, where do you want to go? And find somebody who's already there, and whatever it takes, whether it means paying them or, tricking them or just meeting them for dinner, find a way to get their advice. So, I mentor and I suppose help people now on a paid level. Some people I, occasionally might meet just for a bit of lunch if I feel that they're responding to the feedback and they're taking action. Mm-hmm. But I think if I was to go back to myself when I was 18, that'd be one of the things I'd say to myself and say, listen, keep finding people that know in a real way, not theory, what they're talking about. And whatever it takes, just go and learn from them. If it means going working with them for nothing. Like if I think back to like the 2 sales guys I mentioned that I hung out with, I wasn't consciously doing that. I just was trying to figure out how to sell. But I was almost kind of doing it without realising it. And so now I have a mentor myself who's in North America, we were talking about just before this. I also have a kind of a sporadic a mentor, coach, whatever, beat me up person that is in Ireland. And there's somebody that I rate very highly in terms of what I would call true success. And I'm lucky enough that they give me time. So, and then, of course, as I mentioned, my wife is also good for mentoring me. I'm probably going to get into trouble now if she hears this.
Yeah. So, in terms of over the 17 years as you've developed the business, have there been any major changes of course? Have there been any major aha moments, either through your own reflections or through things that mentors have pointed out to you?
That's a pretty big question. So significant turning points. I think one of the big things was, I'm much more clear on it now, was that, there's a phrase in coaching that you'd hear a lot now would be, what got you here won't get you there.
Yeah.
Right? Which actually I don't always agree with now, because sometimes what got me here will get me there. But the gap between here and there is skill. And I didn't understand that. And that's the first thing. So I'm always asking myself now, I'm looking at clients, okay, we want to go there and you're here. What's the skill that we need? And either you learn it or we hire somebody to bring it in to the business. But then also that applies to your personal life too. And then the second thing that I'd be very clear on would be that is now, I suppose, called through the research of Carol Dweck, growth mindset. I didn't have a growth mindset, never heard about mindset. It's much more common now. When I was growing up, didn't even hear about the mind when I was growing up. But what happened was through the breakdown, the reason I got a breakdown was because I had a fixed mindset. And, that's a much longer story. But what happened was, I didn't realise at the time, it got broken. And because I was lucky enough to get a second chance.
There was a lack of mental flexibility and rigidity. So it snapped rather than
I think so,
bending with the...
Now, luckily it snapped and I stayed alive.
Yeah.
That was due to a lucky intervention. But what happened was I came out of that with kind of this conviction. It's hard to describe, to say, okay, well, if I'm going to stay, I got to do it different than what I was doing before. And then it was all about learning. And so it didn't matter how many times I got my head smacked against the wall, which happened quite a bit, I might add. Especially when I left the comfort of my job, my paying job. The first few years in working for myself were really interesting.
Yeah, what did your mother say to you?
That's a great question. Shock.
Shock and horror.
Yeah, shock, absolute shock. Because, you're talking about the job, the pensionable job, big company, da-da-da-da-da. She just was looking at me. She said, what are you doing? This is crazy. I remember the time she was shocked. And then eventually I said, Mom, look, it's going to be hard to explain, but I just have to go. And in the end, she just said, look, if that's what you want, then do it. We'll support you, And to be fair, we were talking about kids beforehand. There was a period, like a couple of years later, where for financial reasons, I literally had to move back into the house with Mum and Dad. And They were great about it. It wasn't for that long, thankfully, but they were great about it. And that's where you realise, family is important. Your support network is important. And sorry, that's the last thing you asked me, because you asked me a big question, which is really interesting. I might write some of this down myself later on. Is I would emphasise the fact that to myself, I'd say, like, one thing I learnt was the skill of being vulnerable, and it is a skill, and the willingness to kind of to build people around you that you have meaningful relationship with, and to really develop those relationships, because especially as a man, I think sometimes we can get caught up with work and forget. We know it's important, but we kind of forget that there's this other network around us. Like, if you have a partner or a wife or husband, your family, and your friends, that it's not a question of maybe I'll hit tough times. It's when you'll hit tough times. That I hadn't seen that, and I didn't really value it. And so when I came out, I joke with my friends now and my wife, and I'd say I learned the skills of being a woman. Is that what I realised was that women communicate differently to men, and so they're much more open with being vulnerable about things. They just talk things out. And I thought, oh, I need to do more of that, because even by talking it out, even if I was talking to somebody who wasn't skilled in helping me, just talking it out to somebody who was a good listener would actually, and everybody I think would relate to that. Just as a side story, when I the first year of when I was trying to recover from the mental challenge time, I call that the dark time, Patrick, in my life. I realised I wasn't assertive. So a skill, wasn't assertive. So how does Shane get to be assertive? Okay, find some books. The only books I could find at the time were assertiveness for women, right? Nothing for men.
Yeah.
Right? And so I bought a couple, read them. Then I said, okay, I need to do a course. Where can I find a course? I looked for a community college, and I couldn't find any for just general. They were only for women. So I went along to one of the nights in one of the Cork, it was a community college, and it was assertive women, and I literally had to convince the woman to let me into the room. and the way I got in was I said to her, look, if I'm sure you role play with women and somebody has to be the man. And she said, oh, well, no, we have a woman. I said, well, I can be the man. And she looked at me, she thought, actually,
good idea.
She said, that might work. And then she said to me, are you sure you're not assertive? And I said, oh, well, that's different now, because I really want to get in. She said, well, actually, that's one of the rules of assertiveness, is knowing what you want. So I said, okay, fair enough. And I went in, and she said to the group, she said, look, if this is a problem after the first night, we'll cut you out. And it worked. And actually I had 6 weeks of being the only guy in a room with 30 women, and actually it was one of the best courses I ever did.
So that was fun, yeah. It's ironic as well, isn't it, that being vulnerable, which you associate maybe with weakness, makes you stronger, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. It does. I think it does, yeah. It's not that you're becoming moany all the time. Do you know what I mean? So I think the vulnerability is to say, look, I'm human too, like you, but, and there has to be a but let's do this now. So let's either change something, or let's figure out what do we change, or even if it's just to say, look, I'm sorry, I made a mistake, I was wrong.
Yeah.
And as a man, that can be challenging.
So here we are, 17 years after leaving Pepsi. You've successfully built the business to the point you're at now. So where do you want to go with it in the future? What do you see out there over the horizon?
I see a lot more speaking, and more on an international level. That's starting a little bit already. So I feel at this point, I've had, I suppose, in business over 20 years experience across 50 industries, working with people at all levels, and I want to bring that knowledge and information, I was going to say wisdom, but that might be a bit arrogant, but certainly proven approach to personal and business success that works. So I want to expand that. So I see speaking being critical to that. I want to do more online stuff, which we're already starting to do. I want to do a lot more writing. So I've written one book already called Inspire Me, and I write a weekly email, like a weekly mail out on my website. And I'm in the middle of writing another book, and I see myself writing a lot more. As we discussed before, I mean, I enjoy writing creatively as well as business, and maybe in the next few years, part of my thinking is I've got a creative project that I might bring into the equation as well.
You told me you wrote and produced a play, is that
right?
Yeah,
The Waiting Room, yeah. So that was one of the gifts out of the dark time, was that I started to kind of look at, well, what's inside me that I want to bring out. And one of the things was, this voice saying, write. And, I was always told in school I was like a C or D level student. in English. But so I wrote a one-act play, and that won. It actually won a national award. And then I went, okay, I had an idea for a full-length play, and I thought we produced the one-act play in an amateur level in Kilkenny. It was great. Actually, my mother directed it, which was always something I wanted to do. She's a very accomplished director in Kilkenny. Her name is Mary, and we crowdfunded. Sorry, I wrote this play called The Waiting Room, and then I put it out to all these producers and directors in Ireland, and didn't get the best feedback. So head smashed against the wall, ego damaged, and then I went. We did a reading in front of a crowd, and they all loved it. And I went, hang on a second here, the crowd likes it. Okay, if I have my business head on here, I was trying to get somebody else to produce it. If I had my business head on here, what would I do differently? And I went, okay, the crowd likes it. That's good feedback from the audience, from the customer. Let's form a production company. And that's what I did. And I hired a director. We hired professional actors, some of which would be at the top of the game, like they would be on shows like Fair City and things like that. And really great. And then into rehearsal for 2 weeks, and then we put it on the Civic Theatre 2014, and then we took it on tour in the autumn of 2014. And happy to say it was a great success, you know. And what was nice about it was we crowdfunded it. My clients, once I came out about it, which I was a little bit nervous about because, you know, it was a new thing for me, they got behind it. They sponsored it in some cases. They sold tickets. They brought their staff. They talked about it, and it was amazing. And it was what was, I suppose, a great joy was something that it was inside me for 7 years. It wasn't an easy process to drag out. I did procrastinate, being honest. And then eventually a friend of mine, who actually is one of the mentors I mentioned earlier on, she said to me, you know, whatever happened to that idea? And I said, well, you know, the timing isn't right and this, that and the other. And then she said, well, what would you say to yourself if you were a client? What would you say to them? I'd say, oh, don't mind that. Let's go. How important is it? And so she held me accountable for the next 6 to 7 months to write every week, and she'd check in every week. So that's the power again of a mentor or a coach or whatever, just somebody to hold you accountable. And that was a big lesson because it was one of the busiest times of my life because we had 2 young kids. My business was, in terms of what it is now as a solo practitioner, it was only early days and growing really. There was a lot going on with work. I didn't have the time logically, but because she held me accountable and put me under the cosh, all of a sudden time just expanded. And so literally I found myself getting up early because I didn't want to disappoint her. If I was on a flight, say like today coming from London, I'd be like out writing. Even if it was tosh, I just write it and got it done. And that was a big lesson because I was procrastinating for 7 years waiting for the perfect time. Yeah,
we all know about procrastinating.
I'm sure you're human.
Tell me about it.
You're human.
So the business, how do you market? How do you promote yourself now? Do you use social media or is it more word of mouth, or how does that work?
To date, it's been primarily like yourself, word of mouth and referral. And I think that's probably, to me, that's still the best because like-minded people, if they get good results, will refer like-minded people. So if you've got good clients, they refer good people. Yeah. And that's great. Now, increasingly going forwards, I've never really liked social media personally. I find it very distracting. But as I joked with somebody recently, it seems to be doing fine without me. You know, yeah. Facebook's value seems to be going fine. So I've actually engaged somebody this year to help with some of the social media strategy. And I've also brought on some people to help with PR and things like that. So from the point of view of, as I was saying to you about increasing the brand for speaking opportunities and also future books and also extending reach for online side, I see social media being critical to that. So I'm engaged with it now, even though I've delegated, we'll say 80% of the work around it. I'm still involved in and very much involved around what's the messaging, etc. How do we do it? But the execution I give to somebody else. So yeah.
Okay. And you mentioned earlier that mostly the people you're working with, they're business owners or they're executive managers in business. So if you were to say 2, 3 key abilities that those people need to really get good at, what would you put your finger on?
Well, usually when I meet them, they're generally pretty accomplished already, as in like they probably have achieved a degree of financial success, but that's not my definition of success. So I think what they need to get at, number one, I think at the moment would be the ability to create clarity. That's an increasing challenge for people, huge challenge. What they don't realise is that that's a mental skill, and that when you understand how to create, first of all, clarity of mind, that impacts on your state of mind. your state of being, and then it's much easier to create a vision, which is the second thing, that you actually can create a meaningful picture of what success looks like in the future, because once you create kind of an exciting future, that's what really drives the energy in you into the business. And at the moment, what I'm seeing is that people's minds are, I suppose, stressed, and they're lacking this clarity. It's very hard then to kind of really get into a vision mentally. And the best of the best, and research has proven this now, and this is my experience, is that you have to have the mental skill of visualization, imagination, seeing the future as if it's already happened. And then from there, talk to your team about it relentlessly, because that's where, in a way, you're almost programming their minds towards it and coming out of the problems. And then the third thing, you asked me for 3, wasn't it?
2 or 3, yeah.
Yeah, okay. The third thing I'd say would be treat yourself like a professional athlete. So, you know, if Rory McIlroy was here, we'll say at the interview today, and you said to him, well, you know, how's your physical training going, etc. He said, oh, no, I don't believe in that. I'm stopping that. You'd look at him kind of go, I think you're missing a trick. And like if you think about that, even that, say golf in particular, that all changed really when Tiger Woods came in. You know, regardless of whatever's happened to him now, he kind of upped the game on physical training, nutrition, weights, and that even comes into, you know, things like stress management and your mind as well. You know, they all have full-time psychologists now, you know, these guys. I think every CEO entrepreneur has to look at their business. It's a serious thing. You know, it determines a lot in their life. But how serious are you looking at yourself like a professional athlete would? And to me, if you want to be a CEO entrepreneur and to be the best you can be, you got to have a professional approach to your state, to your health, to your energy. Energy is what drives business, which is what drives cash. And I think that's very loose still. I mean, it's definitely better. We were talking about California earlier on. Mm-hmm. You know, over there, they would get it. Yeah. You know, but I think some of those guys would still have a lot to learn about the mental side. But in Ireland, UK, some of Europe, you know, they're becoming more active, more conscious of it, but there's still a way to go.
Interesting. So outside of business and outside of the world of clients and speaking and so on, what do you do yourself? What do you like to do? You mentioned the playwriting venture. What else? What else do you like to do?
Yeah, well, I haven't done any playwriting there for a while since then, you know. Well, I love spending time with Judy and the kids, Sam and Jane. So, you know, I've got certain things during the week. Like my favourite time during the week is having dinner with them. That's my favourite time. Mm-hmm. Just to try and, you know, catch up on what's actually going on. So that's my favourite time. It's
good to keep that, isn't it? The meal times with the family, which a lot of people are losing.
Yeah, no, it is. Yeah, and I think that again, you know, I feel lucky because that again, if I'm being honest, that all comes back to that difficult time that I mentioned. Is that I just realised that life is precious, and we all know it, and it hits us when we go to a funeral. But for me, that's probably the biggest thing I've taken out of my life is that, you know, every day I just don't take it for granted anymore. So one of my number one things is if I can do it, and I'm in the country, is get home and have dinner, and like we're just there and we just talk. And Judy is very much of the same mindset, which is great. Outside of that, I love hiking, and I live in Wicklow, which is called the Garden County of Ireland, and only 20 minutes away is one of the most beautiful landscapes, which you probably know as well, Glendalough. So one of my favourite things is to go up there for hikes, either by myself or sometimes with friends, and even sometimes actually I'll drag a client up there moaning, but at the end they're always delighted. And then outside of that, I love writing, and I love reading. So yeah, there's other things in terms of like walks and swims and everything else, but they're the core ones.
I think you told me you were a bit of a movie buff, yeah?
I love movies, yeah.
So,
yeah.
Say in the last year or so, what good movie have you seen?
Oh my God, put me on the spot.
One that you liked.
I'm not sure. Actually, I'm not sure if I've seen a great movie over the last few years. But what I saw recently was a fantastic, just this week actually, a really short documentary, about 30 minutes long, called The Long Shot, which I thought, if you would like to be inspired to see. Just be reminded that there still is good in the world and there still is lucky breaks for good people. Mm-hmm. It's about a guy who was wrongfully convicted, or was very close to being wrongfully convicted and given the death sentence for something that he was adamant he hadn't done. And this bizarre set of circumstances that, do you know the show Curb Your Enthusiasm? Larry David. It's one of my favourite comedies. But bizarrely, he gets involved in this thing kind of halfway through the documentary, which is completely left of field and fascinating, very coincidental, but effectively it saved this guy's life. But it's really worth watching that. As an aside, in Ashford where I live, there's a brilliant project going on, created by a guy called Joe O'Connell, where they set up Ashford Film Studios. So literally 5 minutes from where I live, there's this phenomenal activity going on. If you know the TV show Vikings, that's where it's made. But he has a vision to build the biggest studio in the world. So you're talking about ambitious people not too far from where we are, then that's a biggie.
Good. So what good stuff are you reading then?
I just got a High Performance Habits from Brenda Burchard. I only came in writing this week, but the one that I've just started in, which I've been waiting for 6 months to read, is a book called Principles by Ray Dalio, who is a guy I've been tracking for the last 7-8 years. And if you're into business, it's a phenomenal book to get. I mean, it's just packed with great lessons. He built and has built one of the most successful hedge fund companies in the world, Bridgewater. I think if I've got the name right, Bridgewater and Associates, and they are one of the best performing hedge funds ever. But his approach and his lessons are priceless. So if you're listening to this and want to get a book, I would recommend you get that one. It won't disappoint.
Very good. Favourite piece of music?
Well, let's think back to the movie. So I'm a massive fan of soundtracks, and I just think all the best composers go where the money is really, and that's in movies, and maybe in time to come TV. So one of my favourite composers is Hans Zimmer, and there's a movie called Inception, which is a clever movie, actually stars Leonardo DiCaprio and the Irish actor who's great, Cillian Murphy, and there's a track in it called Time, and I just think it's a stunning piece of composition. There's no singing; it's orchestral, but it's just, to me, it's mesmerising. So, are you going to play it?
Yes, indeed, we will.
Okay,
we'll
great.
find it and we'll play it.
Brilliant.
So, before we finish, then, tell us, where can people find out more about you, more about your services? Is there a website? Is there a telephone?
Yeah. Well, the best thing to get the telephone and everything else is the website, which is ShaneCradock.com, CRADOCK, it's 1D.com. And everything is on that. And as I say, I have a weekly email that I send out. It goes out to people all over the globe, but actually it does. It goes out to a lot of people. It surprises me who's on the list. And I write that it goes out every Monday. And so if you opt in and sign into on the homepage, you get access to that every week. And there's a little bit of nugget of one of my catchphrases is better mind, better business, better life. And so I write about one of those themes every Monday in an email that's read in less than 60 seconds. And it's not a kind of an overselling machine either. So it's really about just content. Half the time I think I write for myself, actually, to be honest with you.
Thanks so much, Shane. It's been a real pleasure, and wish you every success for the future with
Thanks,
the business.
Patrick. Thanks for asking me in.
You're very welcome.